With release event weekend kicking off, OP14 has a ton of people excited, not only because it's a brand new set that's going to introduce new decks, a whole new format, etc. into the game, but stacked on top of it is EB04, the green, purple, and blue cards from that set being combined in there for a souped up biggest set of all time. Now, as always, what I do on the channel, I try to go over a buy list of every single set as it's releasing, because there's a ton of cards that you're going to want to get in this set, and because it's so big, you might have to prioritize some. Might get some of these first before you jump over to these. I have an entire Google spreadsheet of every single buy list of every single set that I've done that you can go in and reference. It's free to view down in the description below, and I'll update it with more sets over time, so you can always go back and reference it. I'll have cards labeled in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 being the best cards in the set, and tier 3 being more of like tech cards or rogue options. Basically, any card that I mention is viable in some form or fashion. Also, go ahead and assume that every card that I talk about you need a play set of. It's kind of just the easiest way to do it, but if there are cards that I really only think you need 2 or 3 of, I'll mention those. I'm going to be recording for like 2 hours because the set is so huge, so let's get into it. But first, let's hear from more from our sponsor. The holidays have officially hit at Nen Garden, and they're following up their Black Friday with a huge sale continuing. If you go ahead right now and buy any 2 playmats on their website, you can get your order $10 off from the listed price, which is basically a steal when we're talking about playmats, right? So not only do you get these incredible deals, but my affiliate code actually stacks on top of it to save you even more money this holiday season. Spread the holiday cheer by using code Atrocious at checkout for 10% off your order on these already great deals. The link to Nen Garden's website will be in the description below, and thank you so much for supporting one of our great friends here in the community. Happy holidays to you, and let's get back into the video. So we're going to start off with the tier 1 category, and the first one we're talking about is Killer. Now, a lot of the cards, especially before this in the numbered order, are not tier 1, but Killer, just being able to have that activate main once per turn to give Arrested Dawn to a leader or character enables so many different things, especially if more supernova leaders like Eustace Captain Kidd, or maybe branching out to other leaders like Killer, Cavendish, Luffy supernovas, etc. all need a Dawn ×1 effect. This isn't leader locked in any way, so I really like having this Killer. Now, I'll generically put 1-drop searchers in the tier 1 category, so you'll see this pretty frequently, but especially now that we're getting so many more 1-drop searchers that have a secondary effect on top of what the on play does, means that you can use this in a whole bunch of different situations, right? You can use this in so many different supernova archetypes, right? Most obviously, I've seen this in Trafalgar Law coming in this set, but I've also seen supernova packages in Red Green Smoker, and this Luffy being able to -1000 power on the attack, even though it'll most likely die when your opponent swings into it, the -1000 power can be huge to try to help you board clear and control. Eustace Captain Kidd, I think, is also just a nice supernova card as well, right? A 4-cost 5000 power blocker that if you've got a supernova type leader, you'll be able to cheat out on top of that a 2000 power or less character. Again, even though right now it's mostly just good in Trafalgar Law, the new red leader, I think that this is going to have a lot of value in the future as well, especially as a block 4 card. You know, we're going to have it for several years. That's a lot of opportunities for red supernova leaders to come out. This can be great for getting out chum blockers, searchers, and other utility pieces of the sort. We've got Zoro here, and this definitely has seen way more play than just Trafalgar Law, right? Just a generically good card, a 7-cost 8000 power rush kind of character, but with that, when attacking of -1000 power, can help turn the tides in a lot of different matchups with board control similar to the Luffy. X-Drake, I think, also is just a very good card, right? Having that protection effect for a lot of the supernova cards, being able to minus your leader 2000 power is kind of a weird effect, but there are some niche scenarios, I feel like, in several instances where it is beneficial to utilize it. And then, just like Zoro, -2000 power with a supernova, navy, and Drake pirate pirates typing, as well as being a slash type character. I'm a huge fan of this card in red green smoker, right? Just another immovable body that's going to be an 8k on defense because of that smoker leader effect, because it is searchable off of something like Perona. Especially as just a regular rare, I'd have this in your back pocket. We'll go back to red in the later categories, but now we're going to go into green, starting off with Kiku Nojo. Now there's going to be a lot of Dracula Mihawk cards that are in the tier 1 category because Dracula Mihawk is a top deck within the format upon release, whether you think it's a real deck or a fake deck. It's going to be very popular regardless. Kiku Nojo is a great 2k, right? Being a searchable card off of Slash, and at the end of turn, always standing as active. You may have seen in a lot of my commentary videos with Dracula Mihawk that a lot of times when this is played down, people will utilize this Kiku Nojo as a 5,000 power swing, right? Especially on the 3 Dawn turn if you play this Kiku Nojo on your first Dawn turn. Also, having the Land of Wano typing puts it in different packages like Yamato, for example, and can even be a good searchable 2k in something like Green Zoro if it were ever to come back in format. There's a lot of utility on this being a searchable 2k in Slash. Now, Shanks is a tier 1 card in my opinion. Whether you like playing him or not in Dracula Mihawk, it's a perfect fit that has so much value in the game plan, especially when there's a lot of different game plans trying to specifically counter Shanks. It's such an important card in the Dracula Mihawk deck. Not only being able to rest a 7,000 base power character or less, which is most blockers that we've got in the format, but also when he's rested, being able to minus 1,000 power on your opponent's entire board, especially in the later stages of the game as Dracula Mihawk, when you're playing down Law and Beppo to become a 7,000 power leader, that minus 1,000 power on your opponent's side of the field could be detrimental, right? It can take a lot more stuff like Dawn to be able to power up and swing at your leader. Dashiki is another great card that we see in Dracula Mihawk lists, and who knows if we get some green navy leaders in the future. I mean, we already have some with Smoker. This Dashiki having a protection effect of some sort, and then on top of that, with that activate main being an 8,000 power character, is so much value for a 5/8, right? Especially if you're a leader that has different restand abilities like Dracula Mihawk, like Smoker. You'll get a lot of Dawn to be able to utilize for that activate main once per turn. Now, Nami, especially in the pre-release format, if you're in the release events and you get this card, holy smokes, I think you're up. This is a 4-cost blocker that restands 5 Dawn as active. It's heralded as a card that we've never seen before in restand value in the One Piece trading card game, right? Literally gets more value than the 10-cost Shanks because you rest Dawn and restand 5, right? Shanks only rests 10 and restands 10. But on top of that, this Nami rests 8 cost or less characters on the field with its on play effect, and that pretty much is any blocker not named Edward Newgate. You can use this to have so much value, right? It's obviously built for stuff like red-green Luffy to be able to have a ton of Dawn that you need for your leader effect, right? That leader that came out on OP14. But I think you're just going to see this in a lot of different decks, right? We've even seen on the channel in some of the commentary videos that we've done GP Luffy playing this card. And we need a little bit more for GP Luffy to really come back in the format, but this is a good start. Now we got Human Drill. This is just a good 2k to utilize in the Dracula Mihawk deck. It's a 3-cost, 4,000 power animal Muggy Kingdom type character, especially with that your turn when this character becomes rested, rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. This is so good into something like Emu, right? Dracula Mihawk having a favorable matchup into Emu. This is one of the reasons why. Being able to negate something like War Fury, right, to prevent the on-1 draw effect from the on-KO is just so valuable. Now, Perona I've got in the tier 1 category. Some people play this in different decks like Dracula Mihawk, Jewelry Bonnie, and I'm sure we'll see many more along the way as a Monkey Kingdom Thriller Bark Pirates type. On that on play, forces 2 characters with a cost of 5 or less to not be rested until your opponent's next end phase. That's no blocking, that's no attacking, that's no activate main to rest. This card, in my opinion, super valuable with green. And then on that on KO effect, you can go ahead and just spit out a 5-cost from your hand, immediately replacing the value of the Perona. There's so much good value in this card, in my opinion, even though it's mostly not searchable in all the archetypes that you play it in. And I really enjoyed when Fidelio TCG played it in his deck in the top 4 of the Osaka Championships, I believe it was. We covered that on the channel. It worked out so well, in my opinion. I've also got this Luffy in the tier 1 category, right? This Luffy with a protection effect on it for your Straw Hat Crew type type characters works out so well in all of these different green Straw Hat Crew or partially green Straw Hat Crew decks, right? The protection is not necessarily color locked. So if you do something like red green Luffy and you're trying to protect a red Straw Hat Crew character, voila, you'll be able to protect it. And then on top of that, if you've got green Straw Hat Crew type characters, those ones with a base cost of 4 or more will gain 1,000 power. So you talk about stuff like the 4 cost Zoro, the 5 cost Sanji, all of those recent green Straw Hat Crew cards that we've gotten will gain that power boost. I really like this card. The only green event I've got in the tier 1 category is Strive to Surpass Me, Roronoa Zoro. This is one of the most common event cards in Dracula Mihawk that you'll see, especially the most common from this set, being able essentially to be a rest 1 Dawn for 4,000 powers. Sometimes you rest 2 Dawn instead because of that rest 1 other card requirement, but a lot of times you're pretty chill with that in my opinion. Also, having that trigger of resting a 7,000 base power character or less can be so valuable in the late stages of the game. Even though I don't think in most decks you should play for trigger, you can't say that it's not bad. We've also got Coffin Boat, right? I think you need to play a playset of Coffin Boat in Mihawk in general. It's just such a good card to be able to combo not only with your leader effect, but some of these other cards that we've talked about in this deck, right? We talked about the Tashigi. This could be one of the cards that you rest with the Tashigi plus 2,000 power effect. This could be the other card that you utilize for the Strive to Surpass Me Roronoa Zoro, right? To get that plus 4,000. And especially if your leader is Dracula Mihawk, it replaces itself. I think that this card's actually pretty good in the sealed event format as well, that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, because especially if you have any sort of counter events, right? If you're a Rainbow Luffy leader, you'll be able to not only replace this card in your hand, making your deck a basically, 36 card deck, making it more consistent, but on top of that, being able to restand a Dawn every single turn is just so good, especially if you do have some counter event. You can play out all of your Dawn in different fashions, but still be able to use counter events to protect your characters, which the resource war is huge in sealed format. Going into the blue cards, I've got Arlong, right? 1-drop Searcher looks at the top 4 for any card that's got a cost of 2 or more if you're running a Fishman type leader. Now, I believe that there's only one Fishman type leader so far in the game, and that is Jinbei, but you never know, especially with the Fishman Sun Pirates typing, that we could see something like Arlong become another leader in the game, right? Because I think his leader is rotating in April. Wouldn't surprise me if he got another one, especially to boost up this blue typing. Not too many more cards in OP14 that I consider in the tier 1 category for blue, but Jinbei is one of them. Now, Jinbei, I have just seen in more blue decks outside of Jinbei, right? Most notably Sakazuki, which I know a lot of people are very fond of, right? Especially in something like Sakazuki, when a card is trashed from your hand by an effect, which could be your leader effect, you now have a 10,000 power rush character. Even on top of the on play, if you use maybe your full 10 Dawn, you can just draw 2 cards and then on top of that bounce back a 7 cost or less, which is a ton of value if you're a leader like Sakazuki that spends a lot of time minusing costs. There's a possibility to where, especially if you have stuff established like Brook, your leader effect, and maybe some other things on the board, you can remove a 10 cost, which can be so good. Now, Purple Doflamingo also being a top deck in my mind in OP14. A lot of the staple cards in Doflamingo will make the tier 1 category, including Virgo. This is one of the most important cards I feel like in Doflamingo within my testing, right? With removal kind of coming back a little bit within the format because of Emu falling off a little bit in terms of the amount of people playing the deck. It's still a very good deck, don't get me wrong. Being able to get that protection effect for any of your Doflamingo characters or Don Quixote Pirates type characters is so good. And then with that, when attacking, doing some power minus. We talked about it with X-Ray. We talked about it with Zoro, right? In the red category, just power minus board control is so good, especially in Doflamingo in the late stages of the game. He could be such a tanky leader. We've seen it in the different Doflamingo matches on the channel. I'm excited about this card. I think this is a very, very good card, but it's definitely locked into just Don Quixote kind of decks. We've also got Dellinger in the tier 1 category, right? This is a 1-drop searcher, not necessarily an on-play searcher, but an on-KO searcher, synergizing so well with Don Quixote Doflamingo's leader effect, right? Being able to -1 Dawn, get this Dellinger KO'd, search the top 5, and also re-ramp that Dawn that you minus gives it so much power as like an indirect blocker within the game. Again, one of the reasons why, in my opinion, Doflamingo is so tanky in the late game. You definitely need a playset. Treble is also a staple 2K in Doflamingo. You're almost never really playing it down, but if you do, you'll be able to re-ramp on stuff like your leader effect, right? Because it's on the opponent's turn. But for the most part, staple 2K. Now, I'm going to add Don Quixote Doflamingo in this as well. I've even seen other people put this card in different decks not named Doflamingo. Even though Dawn -3 is so costly, right? Having the flexibility of being able to KO not only an 8 cost or less, which is huge by the way, but on top of that, potentially instead nullifying 3 different 7 costs from being able to rest until your opponent's next end phase is so good and flexible within different styles of matchups, right? If you're having an opponent that's playing 1 big body per turn, this can be really good to be able to KO an 8 cost. If you're playing something that has more swarm, low to the ground kind of thing with like Boa Hancock or Emu of the sorts, just a great card to be able to turn off all their bodies for a single turn. This one though, I think you really only need 3 copies of. I don't really see anybody else playing more than 3 copies of this card, and I think especially in the purple Doflamingo deck, I don't think you need more than 3. Baby 5 I also don't have a playset at. I have this at 2 copies because most all Doflamingo lists will play 2 copies of this card. Yes, it's really nice to be able to ramp 1 Dawn and be able to heal a life with the on KO effect if you redirect into it. But in several situations of the game, the Dawn -2 to redirect and KO to utilize the heal is pretty costly, so you better be set up pretty well with stuff like 8 cost Doflamingo and things like that, especially because you may also be set up to use something like slow beam in the turn, which is another Dawn minus. Or maybe you did 10 drop Doflamingo in the turn. This was already on the field. Still though, a powerful card, and again, one of the reasons why Doflamingo is so tanky in the end game. Monet is also a really good card in this deck, right? Being able to not only to ramp, but on top of that, with the on KO effect, if you decide to direct into this and get it KO'd, not only do you get +1 card with the draw 2 trash 1 very nice filter, but you get to re-ramp Dawn. Up to 2 rested Dawn, right? This can have so much value, and especially with something like the 10 cost Doflamingo, if you play it down on the field, Dawn -3, and then you redirect a Dawn into this Monet, going back 4 Dawn in total, Monet will bring you back 2, so then in your next turn, you go back to 10 Dawn, all while being able to hand filter. It's one thing worth noting as well that you could probably argue that a lot of these purple cards can also fit in Sugar. I haven't really tested Sugar in OP14 or even seen a lot of people testing Sugar in OP14, but you gotta admit that at least some of these cards will be able to help out that red purple leader. Now going into black, we've got Miss All Sunday. This, in my, like most of the crocodile cards are in the tier 2 category in my opinion, because I think Crocodile is very much like Jinbei, where like it's a good deck and it's a very viable deck and you can have a lot of success with it, but I don't know if I'd consider it in the top 5 decks. But it's definitely a viable deck if you want to play it, especially in stuff like Card Fest coming up. But Missile Sunday, no doubt, is a broken card, right? Especially if we get black or partially black Baroque Works leaders in the future. This essentially being a Gecko Moria kind of card is just so good, right? We've seen it before and we'll continue seeing it again, especially in synergy with something like Bon Clay that we'll talk about later in this video. Missile Sunday can pack a punch and swarm the board so nicely, especially on curve on a 7 Dawn turn before you go into your Croc loop. I've got Miss Valentine in here in the tier 1 category as well, right? 1-drop Searcher also builds up the trash, especially because it's a top 4. There's not a lot of these 1-drop searchers that trash the rest of the cards that they search that go in top 4. Most of them are top 3. Or you have something like Victorious Sindri, which just straight up mills the top 5. This, in my opinion, is one of the more interesting 1-drop searchers, and it's definitely leader locked right in that Baroque Works category because it definitely should. You don't want something like this in Rob Lucci or Emu or anything like that, but definitely a mainstay within the deck. Going into the events, we've got Ground Death. Now, this is one of the best black cards in general because I think that just most all black decks should play this card, right? Not only in the late stages of the game when you have 10 or more cards in trash, which is pretty easy for most black decks, I feel like, a 1 Dawn 4,000 power counter event, but on top of that, you're going to be able potentially resting 3 cards in total to negate a 5 cost and its effects, which include stuff like blocker or protection effects, things of the sort, especially because there's a lot of good 4-cost blockers in the format. Cough Cough Marco, Cough Cough Workery. There's a ton of value to be gained in having this ground death within your deck, regardless of what archetype you're playing. Now let's move into everybody's favorite color, yellow. We've got Gorgon Sisters here as the first card. This is like one of the most important cards I feel like in Boa Hancock. When this card hits the field, your win percentage just shoots up exponentially, especially because Boa Hancock has the ability to manipulate their life at times with the combination of starter deck 17 Boa and SEC Kuma. If you're able to put this in your life and just trigger it, play it down on the field, you're basically winning the game. There's so much value that you can get to be able, if you fulfill that activate main of the 3 Amazon Lily or Kuja Pirate type cards in your hand, to give a Dawn to every single character and leader. You can turn 10 Dawn turns into as big as 16 Dawn turns. And that's not including stuff like Ran and things like that we'll talk about later. We've got Shaku Yaku in here in the tier 1 category, just a stable 2K in the Boa deck. And especially if you trigger it off life, not only do you get to draw a card because of your Boa Hancock leader effect, but on top of that, you're going to be able to draw 2, trash 2 if your opponent has 3 life or less, which can be pretty good filter. And it's a 5,000 power character on top of that, so you'll be able to swing pretty easy, especially against other 5,000 power leaders. Silver's Rayleigh is, in my opinion, just a generically good yellow card, right? Especially for multicolored leaders like Boa Hancock and Blue Yellow Nami. Especially when your opponent gets to 3 or less life cards, being able to KO a 7,000 base power character is so valuable in my opinion. On top of that, having a trigger that does that exact same effect, even though you don't get the body on the field, gives it a lot of different situations when you have these decks playing stuff like Hiyori to be able to manipulate their life. Or even I talked about earlier, SEC Kuma. I'm a big fan of this card, and I think if you're a multicolored leader that is partially yellow, I really think you should consider this card. Boa Hancock, in my opinion, is one of the best yellow cards in the set. I have seen this in more than just Boa Hancock decks, right? Most notably Black Yellow Moria as well. Just being able, if you have a 7 Warlords type leader, to be able to force your opponent to take a life as you heal 1, this effect is bonkers. There's not much more to say about this card. I mean, it's just a generically good card if you're a 7 Warlords of the Sea kind of deck. Marguerite I've got in the tier 1 category. I know some people don't run this, but I'm convinced that you should run this in the Blue Yellow Nami decks. By just being able to be a 3-cost 5,000 power searcher that's ready to swing, but also on top of that, have a trigger to play it out on the field and activate your leader effect, this card can get so much value in my opinion. Sure, it sucks to have a brick in the late game, but in the early stages of the game, when you get to like a 3 Dawn turn, if you're on the odd curve, this is a great card to play on curve. This is also a great card on the even curves as well on 4 if you don't have something like the starter deck Boa, right? It's another valuable option to play out onto the field. Ran is also just a great card within the Boa deck, definitely a staple. Being able every single turn on that activate main without having to rest it or tap anything or trash a card or whatever, just a generic give a rested Dawn to your Boa Hancock or a Kuja Pirates leader, or even a character as well. Especially with the free play trigger effect, if you're a Kuja Pirates type leader, I mean, this card's so good. This card also, when it hits the field, raises up your win rate very nicely. Just not as much as the Gorgon Sisters. You'll Frighten Me, I feel like, is a staple card in the Boa Hancock deck. I'm just not convinced on how many you want to play, right? With that counter event of being able to negate an opponent from attacking on one of their characters, it's just so good in the end game, right? Especially in Boa Hancock, you have a ton of different 1-cost events that you could potentially play with You'll Frighten Me and Slave Arrow as being the most notable options. In the late stages of the game, you really make your opponent think about, okay, are they leaving up the 1 Dawn for the You'll Frighten Me, or is it Slave Arrow, right? Slave Arrow potentially getting about 6,000 counter, but You'll Frighten Me being able to negate an entire attack. And a lot of times, if you're in that 50-50 call, if you incorrectly call that 50-50, you'll lose the game. This card, in my opinion, very very powerful. I don't know how many copies. I would suggest just getting 4 because I've seen lists from the Japan Championships play 4 of these, but I've also seen people kind of tone it back and play like 2 copies. It all depends on what you want in your list. Now, Dracula Mihawk I think is a tier 1 card specifically because the Dracula Mihawk leader is a good deck, but I think honestly if Dracula Mihawk was not a good deck, then I think this card would kind of be buns. Same with the other SEC. But anyways, this card does get a lot of value if you're playing something like Dracula Mihawk or just have the opportunity to rest this character, right? Because when it becomes rested, up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 9 or less, which is pretty much everything, cannot be rested until your opponent's next end phase, and on the opponent's attack once per turn, you can trash one card for plus 2,000 in battle. The value is definitely there, even though it's very niche in where it should be. Crocodile, also very powerful, but in very niche situations, right? That on-play effect of negating one of your opponent's characters with the cost of 9 or less, and then potentially drawing one card if they have a character with a cost of 0 or 8 or more on the board. This definitely gives it a chance to be flexible in other decks, in my opinion, because of that second clause of 0 or 8 or more. Obviously, with Crocodile, right, and that leader being able to minus 10 on one of your opponent's characters fulfills that cost of 0 effect. But if you're a non-Crocodile deck and you don't really have a ton of Dawn minusing, a lot of times when you play this guy down on the field, your opponent's going to have an 8 cost on the field. So you'll be able to replace this card in your hand on that draw 1. But then specifically in Crocodile, when you use Crocodile's leader effect to KO this Crocodile, you're able to just play it back down onto the field. You have the opportunity to stun 2 characters on the turn that this is played. It's so much value in my opinion. I love the Croc loop in this deck. And now because of how I have the chapters set up, we're going to go into the tier 1 cards of EB04, and then when we get to tier 2, we'll bring it back up to the top in OP14. Starting out with Carrot, I really like this Carrot, and I think Monkey Fight TCG has said it best that this card is really a tech in Carrot, right? Because of that on-play effect of if you have a Minx type leaders, obviously build for Carrot, you can set up to 2 Minx type characters and leaders as active, gives it a very aggressive stance in the end stages of the game while also building up a 9,000 power character on the field. It gives you a lot of flexibility in not only being able to stun multiple characters on the 5 cost Carrot from OP08, but also get a couple extra swings in to be able to go for game. It's almost like a pseudo rush character in a sense because you get to restand different characters. I mean, think about the end stages of the game when you've got Law and Beppos on the field, you've got a different 8 cost Carrot, maybe you attached a couple Dawn onto your leader. You'll be able to swing 11,000 power with Beppo or whatever amount of power. I think it's 11,000 power. You'll be able to swing that multiple times while also doing it on another character or maybe your leader. It's just so good, but I personally think, and after watching some games, that it's definitely a tech card. Now, I've got Megalo in here as the other green card in the tier 1 category. I think that this could potentially just be generically good removal, right? Being able to, on the on-play, to rest the character and KO an 8,000 power character or less means that you can focus your other bodies to swing into it. Obviously, it's very good in like the Fishman kind of decks that are going to be able to find this potentially, but like overall as a green utility 2K, I don't know, maybe if you're like a deck that doesn't necessarily draw or search, you kind of just have the cards with you and that's basically it, you could have some pretty dangerous moves with this Megala, especially if you combo it with something like Cavendish, Restanding Dawn. I don't know, I think this card gets a ton of value for only being a 4 cost that does this on the on-play effect. You don't have to trash any cards or anything. I've got Isho in the tier 1 category, and this may not surprise a lot of you, especially if you've been enjoying Kuzan in the OP14 EB04 format, right? Ended up recently winning one of the Chinos Cups, and this card is a huge addition for the deck, right? With that on-play effect of being able to not only trash 2, draw 2 with your leader effect, but make your opponent bottom deck 2 cards. If they've got exactly a 6 card hand, you put them down to 4. That is so good in my opinion. And then I've said this before with a ton of other characters, but on that when attacking, being able to power minus is so good, especially when you're a 7,000 power base character. That means you can go in at 10,000 power characters and be able to power match them, right? Because you get that plus 1,000 power with the Dawn and you minus 2 to them, you can battle 10,000 power characters with this card. This card is crazy. I've also got Terracotta in the tier 1 category, especially because we've seen it in the beginning stages with Sanji, right? Sanji having that 3 cost in UP that has the Alabasta typing, but especially when we get to EB03, this may be a card that we really slot in with Vivi, right? Vivi is already a pretty good deck in the Eastern meta, and especially with this card, it's going to gain more value to be able to utilize. So I really like this card, especially in the end game. You can really just go all in on this unblockable character, especially if you're running the Alabasta engine. And in something like UP Sanji, when you've built this guy up over time and he's plus 4,000, plus 5,000 as an 8 or 9,000 power character, this could be a heavy swing in the end game. So if you go down to 0 against a deck that runs Alabasta type characters, I would be careful. I'm also going to talk about in the tier 1 category for Bluegrass. Now, Bluegrass, similar to Isho, is just a very good card to be able to put in Kuzan, right? Not necessarily using it for the on-play effect, although there is some value in matchups like Dracul Mihawk, for example, right? That runs those Kiku Nojos, those Peronas, right? Those little 1-cost characters that they want to swing with or utilize for their leader effect. You can go ahead, bottom deck one of those, and then on the when attack, you draw 1 card, trash 1 card from your hand, which then prompts your leader effect to draw 1 more card. So it's basically draw 1, trash 1, draw 1, which is a +1 on the attack. And as a 6,000 power character, pretty doggone good, I think. All right, let's talk about the tier 2 card, starting off with Rogue. He's a staple in the Trafalgar Law deck, in my opinion. Being able to draw 1 card and KO a small, frail body on your opponent's side that's probably going to swing at these characters is great for board control that really forces your opponent to either utilize their leader swing or maybe one of their bigger bodies to go into this Rogue. You can't use like a chum searcher to be able to get him out. I've also got Cavendish in here, mostly again for the Trafalgar Law deck. Has the ability to be a 2-cost character with Rush, right? Especially with that power swapping ability. It's very easy to be able to get this guy down on the field and then be able to give him Rush. Just a very, very valuable card within this deck, in my opinion, especially for your aggression. I've got Trafalgar Law as well in the tier 2 category. This is honestly, in my opinion, kind of fringe on tier 1 and tier 2. So debate with me in the comments if you will. I can be swayed pretty easily. Just a good 10,000 power rush. All right, pretty solid. And then with that on opponent's effect, if you go ahead and trash 2 cards, which is one of the reasons that I consider this in tier 2, is that is very costly. But you're able to basically negate an attack potentially, being able to protect your leader from a swing just for that battle. It's a pretty good card. It's pretty good in the Trafalgar Law deck. Basil Hawkins, I've also got in the Trafalgar Law deck. It is a 1-drop searcher similar to Dellinger, but the fact that you can't redirect and force the opponent to swing into this, as well as being an on-KO effect, is the reason that I've got it in the tier 2 category. But on top of that, this is very specifically in the Trafalgar Law deck because it only looks for supernova type characters with 2,000 power or less, not named Basil Hawkins. So there's not a lot of utility, in my opinion, for these other decks that maybe want to run supernova packages that aren't the new red Trafalgar Law. Still a good card, though. Don't get me wrong. Bartolomeo, just a good 2K that I see most all Trafalgar Laws run, and in the late stages of the game, could be a blocker. We've also got I Have a Plan to take down one of the 4 Emperors. This is just a generic, nice searcher event. I will say, though, one thing that I do like about this is that this searches for Supernovas and Straw Hat Crew kind of cards. So especially if you're a red deck that runs a little bit of Supernovas, but also Straw Hat Crew, this could be a pretty good one to be able to find a key piece that you may need. Dang, I didn't even realize when I was making the sheet that I basically didn't have any green cards in the tier 2 category. We'll go back to them at tier 3. But Koala I've got in the tier 2 category. This is a pretty good card, I think, 2K that you include in the Jinbei deck. It just has a ton of value. I didn't see it as value at first, but being able for 2 Dawn to utilize that activate main and give plus 2,000 power during the turn to one of your Merfolk leader and characters, basically in the Jinbei deck means that you can play this down, right, tap 2 Dawn, get rid of this character to plus 2,000 power somewhere like your leader leader. And then as Jinbei, if you use your leader effect, you can use those 2 rested Dawn you utilized for the koala to get an extra 2,000 power. It's basically like a free 2,000 power when you're going in for the end game, right? Because it is getting rid of a 2K, but still a good one to have. It's also Foot Shout Island typing, which I couldn't tell you what that is, but who knows, maybe we see this later in the future in the card game. I've got Chu. This is a staple card in Jinbei. Replaces itself in your hand. Also, just a 3,000 power character for 1 cost is pretty nice, especially in the extra turns, right? In Jinbei, you use your leader effect, and this is a 5,000 power character swinging. Pretty doggone good, in my opinion. I've also got Hachan in the tier 2 category. This, I really only think you need like 2 copies of, though. This is what I mostly see in Jinbei decks. People sometimes run 4, but I really just think you need 2, especially because that on KO effect draws 1 card, right? Chu gets the immediate value, but your opponent has to acknowledge the Hachan and get rid of it in order for you to get that value of replacing it in your hand. Especially with the Dawn ×2 as well. If you try to swing with this and you don't have the Dawn attached, your opponent's probably going to capitalize on it and get rid of it as soon as possible. I've got Fisher Tiger as well in the tier 2 category. This is a broken card in Jinbei. I think this card is so good, just being able to draw 3 cards, and if we get any other blue Fishman kind of cards or leaders and decks, this card definitely going in it. The end of turn, though, is the real downside of it, but synergizes well with Jinbei's leader effect because, well, if you're going to trash some cards for your hand to fulfill that 5 or less at the end of turn, might as well just use them for your leader effect. Moving into purple, I've got Sugar. Now, Sugar I think is very common in a lot of Doflamingo lists, but it's a card that not everybody is running. It's more of a choice option. This is definitely on the fringe side of tier 1, tier 2 in my opinion. I personally run Sugar in my deck, but not everybody is convinced about it. It's still a valuable card, though. It's basically a Bond Clay without having to try to buy or utilize Bond Clays within your deck, being able to ramp a Dawn. And in the later stages of the game, you could redirect an attack onto this Sugar, and if your opponent's at 6 or more Dawn cards, you'll be able to cheat out a 5-cost character from your hand, which we've talked about great 5-cost characters in this deck, like Monet, like Virgo, and even other older cards like an OP10 Rosinante. I like this one. I've got Bullet String in the tier 2 category. I know some Doflamingos like playing this card, and I've even seen other people like Purple Yellow Rosinante play this card, right? Purple Yellow Rosinante having the Don Quixote Pirates typing, right? Being able to utilize this for plus 4,000 power and make you a plus 2,000 power leader, especially if you really like Purple Yellow Rosinante. And I'll talk about another card in the tier 2 that is very good in my opinion. I just watched a good video the other day of Krolzor showcasing the deck and his build, and several games, I think like 5 different games with it against like 3 or 4 different leaders. It was a very good video. I was really impressed by the deck. Now going into all the Croc cards in black, we've got Miss Wednesday, right? Miss Wednesday, a good 2K in a lot of these Croc decks, being able to minus 3,000 power on a character. This is a very, very good card in board control, especially in combination with Miss All Sunday, right? Being able to KO this character to make a 0 cost on the board and then minus 3,000 power something and then swing into it. 3,000 power is a lot in my opinion. So if you use this as counter in the early stages of the game, the late stages of this game, this card can get you a lot of value. I've got Miss Golden Week as well, another good 2K in this deck, right? On KO, draw 2, trash 2. So if you utilize your leader effect on this card, be able to filter your hand. Miss Double Fingers Zala, I really like as well. I think you should just go ahead and get 4 copies, but I've seen a lot of people only do 3 within this deck. And I think personally that 3 is a pretty good number. Miss Doublefinger, I wasn't really high on when it was first revealed, but it's very, very good in my opinion within your game plan, right? Being able to give all of these Baroque characters plus 2 cost, and this being a 7,000 power character, an ongoing effect, is actually valuable in a lot of different situations, both offensively and defensively. A very good card. Miss Merry Christmas, another good 2K within the deck. Allows you in a lot of situations, if your opponent has a pesky 1-cost stage, you can get rid of it. I mean, think about the different 1-cost stages. In Dracula Mihawk, they have Coffin Boat. If your Emu opponent were to, for some reason, put out Mary Joie, you can get rid of that. Blackbeard, you can get rid of Full of Lead. Red Yellow Sabo, you can get rid of the Rev Army HQ stage. Stage removal is very cheeky and also pretty good, and so having this Miss Merry Christmas can be very nice in a lot of different situations, both for meta and a little bit more off meta. Mr. 1 Daz Bones is another another great card within the Crocodile deck, right? Especially because if you can bring this out onto the field and you have a 0 cost character on your opponent's side or 8 or more, this guy gets pseudo rush on characters, can attack characters on the turn that it's played, all while resting a 0 cost, which could be something that you made a 0 from your leader effect. This card is very good and allows you to get a lot of pressure as Crocodile, and I really like this card in the deck. You're going to want full 4 copies. You'll want 4 copies as well as Bon Clay or Mr. 2 Bon Hooray Bentham. Why do people just call it Bon Clay? With that KO effect of being able to bring out a 5 cost or less from the hand or trash is very, very nice. Not only like on curve, you'll be able on a 4-Don turn, use your leader effect, KO this, make something a 0 and play Daz Bones that we just talked about to be able to get that pseudo rush. But this could also be something that comes out from Miss All Sunday, right? Being that 4 cost that you can fulfill, it's basically like Miss All Sunday is cheating out a 5 cost and a 1 cost instead of a 4 cost and a 1 cost. This is another just great card in the Crocodile deck. We've got Mr. 4 Babe, not sure how you pronounce it, but this one I really only think you need at 2 copies. In my personal build, I'm only playing one of these, I think. But overall, he's a good blocker, right? With a blocker with an on KO effect, doesn't even have to be from your leader. It could just be a natural block. You can get an 8 cost or less from your trash into your hand. This could be accidentally milling an 8 cost Crocodile earlier in the game, or bring something like a Miss All Sunday back onto the field to be able to cheat out once again this Mr. 4, or you could just grab a 2K. This card is definitely pretty flexible, but it's hard to play sometimes. Mr. 5 is a pretty good 5 cost card in the Crocodile deck, right? Being able to draw 2, trash 1 if there's a 0 cost or 8 or more onto the field. Just once again, synergizes pretty well with your leader effect and the 4 cost Bon Clay. We've got Hurry Up and Make Me the Pirate King, right? This is a good card, especially in Gecko Moria, or maybe even in any black or partially black Thriller Bark characters in the future. We've got leaders like Perona that could potentially utilize this card, but it's most notably on Gecko. Disappointed as well is a 1 cost Searcher that most all Crocodiles do run, right? And very similar to a lot of the other black Searcher events that we talk about. So look at the top 3, find your specific typing, and trash the rest. Absalom I've also got in this category. Absalom, a good card in the Gecko deck, right? Or any Thriller Bark engine. This could even, like a lot of these Thriller Bark cards, could just be argued in a tier 1 category, because you may have seen other videos like Red Yellow Sabo, right, playing the Thriller Bark engine, or just any partially yellow deck running this core. But for now, unless one of those decks really spice up life and make it into the top decks of the format, I'll just keep this in here. But this is your on KO Searcher card. Being able to look for a Thriller Bark pirate card within the top 3 synergizes pretty well with your leader effect, especially as Black Yellow Gecko. I've got Kumasi in here. Kumasi is a typical 2K that we see a lot of times in the Gecko deck, right? Just a pretty good card. And like most of these other Thriller Bark cards, cheats out a 4 cost Thriller Bark from your trash as rested. Gecko Moria, this SR, although not as good as Boa, does have value in itself, right? Being able to put a Thriller Bark character with a cost of 4 or less, either in the life or on the field, right? And you can get it from the trash, so being able to reutilize different characters to be able to spam out the board is just valuable in a lot of situations and help you buy a turn. Got Dr. Hogback as well as part of this Thriller Bark package, right? On that on KO effect, being able to play a character from trash as active can have so many different benefits within your game plan of being able to maintain board. You'll see a ton of Geckos or any of these Thriller Bark package kind of decks play a lot of this card. And then Perona as well in the final tier 2 card in the OP14 set. Being able to lock one of your opponent's 6 costs or less with on play and on KO brings it in a situation to where it's similar to the green Perona, to where if you utilize its on play effect to stun a 6 cost or less and then use your Gecko Moria leader effect to KO that Perona, you can stun another 6 cost or less on the field. There's a lot of value to be utilized within this card. It's hard to play around a lot of times too, especially in a ton of different matchups where the mid-game kind of cards like 5 costs, 6 costs, 4 costs are so valuable within the game right now. Starting off the EB04 cards in this category, I've got got Kiku Nojo. Now, I think Kiku Nojo is a great card, right, that can be utilized in stuff like the red-green Odin and also Yamato. But I don't think this is exactly what fixes those decks, although very, very strong. Definitely very nice, right? Especially with Yamato having double attack and Odin being able to utilize his leader effect not just once per turn. So he can get an absolutely huge boost with this card as it's played. I'm a big fan of this card, especially in Odin. I've got Jinbei as well in this tier 2 category, right? A 7-cost blocker that allows you in green, if your leader is Fishman or Merfolk, to play out a character card with the cost of 6 or less from your hand with the on KO if you rest another one of your cards. This could be a stage, this could be your leader that can attack, or anything else of the sort. I think this Jinbei is a pretty good card, especially in those different decks that want to utilize it, right, as Fishman or Merfolk. So Shirahoshi can use it, Hody Jones can use it, Jinbei can use it. This is going to bring a lot of utility in those decks for this specific card. I've also got Elaclaw in the tier 2, and I know I was super high on this card when it was first revealed, but in a lot of videos that I've seen and stuff, Elaclaw doesn't necessarily hit the numbers that I thought it would, at least in this format right now. Still very good, don't get me wrong, being able to give plus 3,000 to a leader or character, and then for just 2 Dawn, giving something minus 3 cost to get it in the range of something like the 5-cost Carrot or anything of the sort. It's just a tech option at this point. I'm not convinced that you really want to run 4 copies, but I feel like, especially if the format moves into where that minus 3 cost really matters a lot more, this card can definitely do damage. So you might just want to get 4 copies of it. I've got this Vivi in the category as well, right? Especially in the Vivi specific deck. Being able to play an Alabasta 8 cost or less from your hand, and then your opponent bottom decks a card from hand, regardless of their hand size. Holy moly, this card can get so much value. Not only can you play the Chaka and Pell, which we'll talk about here in a bit, but also previous cards in EB03, like the Alabasta Nami, could just be so good in my opinion. I really like this card, and I'm very curious to see, especially in the Eastern format, when they have the combination of EB03 Vivi and this card, if a lot of these Vivi decks will start moving into this piece in a more Alabasta centralized deck. We got Ice Time in here. I think that this is just like 2 copies at most. I think this is a very hard card to play within the Kuzan deck specifically, but when you do it, being able to negate 2 10,000 power characters or less from attacking till the end of your opponent's next end phase gives you a ton of value, like I talked about with the 5-cost Perona, the 4-cost Perona, and all of these different cards that bring in this can't attack value. I Heard the Sound of Ladies' Teardrops Falling is a great card in UP Sanji, right? Being able to look for a Sanji or event card added to your hand in a deck that is mostly just events, and then with a basically giant gavel effect, right, from OP03, being a counter trash 1 from hand plus 4,000 gives a lot of flexibility, not only as a searcher event, but also a counter event within this deck. This is, in my opinion, an auto inclusion in the UP Sanji deck. Kaido, also a pretty good card. Kaido definitely gets some buffs within the format, and I don't know how high it'll go, but it's definitely a cheeky pick if you want to play it in the upcoming events like Treasure Cups, Card Fest, etc. This Kaido having a KO protection effect for just minusing 1 Dawn is already good enough as a 7/9, but also being able to Dawn -2 and get Rush and also rest a 7-cost or less character. Holy moly, there's a lot of things that you got to remember about this card and so many different value opportunities that you can grab with this card. Similar to King, which has a ton of value proposition, right? As a 6/7, but having that on KO protection effect similar to the Kaido, that activate main can be utilized every single turn to re-ramp to Dawn, especially in the late stages of the game when you play something like the 10-cost Kaido from OP01 that Dawn minuses 6. If you've got something like Onigashima on the field and this King, you're going to be able to get 3 Dawn back just from that, where really your Kaido was only a Dawn -3 to wipe out the whole board, because also you can protect this guy on the Kaido effect because it's an ongoing on KO protection. Queen, also a pretty good card for the Kaido deck, right? Basically being another Onigashima in a a sense. Not only being able to draw 2 cards potentially, being a net 0 kind of filter effect on the on play, but being able on that activate main to re-ramp 1 Dawn is so good within the beginning stages of the game and then just gets more value onward. We got Charlotte putting in here in the tier 2 category, a good card for the UP Sanji deck, especially because on your opponent's stack once per turn, because you're Sanji and you're more than likely going to have 4 or more events in trash, which trashing 1 card could be the 4th event, by the way. Being able to get plus 2,000 power in battle is so nice to where if you have a card like Gum Gum Jet Culverin, for example, that you're not really going to see value of and doesn't really get any counter power, now it essentially is a 2k counter event that you can utilize. This Charlotte Pudding card, a very nice one. Absolutely love this card in the deck. Foxy is a really nice card within the Foxy deck, right? You may have seen some videos from people like Renee talking about this. But similar to the Kaido, there's a lot of things that you need to remember about this card, right? With the on play of Dawn -1, if your leader's Foxy, draw 2, trash 1, so you're already getting that filter effect that we talked about has been so good in so many other cards. But on top of that, you get to rest a 9 cost or less, which is basically anything in the format. But because your leader effect is Dawn -3 and the deck is all about like looping that leader effect, and you get these re-ramping activate mains on the Ito Mimizu and the Foxy from, I believe it's OP07, this Foxy as well also has the activate main once per turn of re-ramping Arrested Dawn. This card is so good for the Foxy deck in general and generates so much value in total. I really, really like this card. Porsche I've got in here as well because it's just a nice searcher card for the Foxy Pirates, right? Foxy Pirates not really having search in the deck up to this point can be so useful in trying to find your different key pieces that you're going to need, like Ito Mimizu, like the Foxies that we talked about. And it's a top 5 as well on top of that. So maybe I would have this in the tier 1 category. I don't know. It's locked into Foxy Pirates and you have to find a Foxy Pirates card. So unless Foxy wins Cardfest, I'll keep it in this category. Now, Rosinante and Law is a card that I've been so impressed with in the purple-yellow Rosinante deck that I referenced earlier. Under the rules of the game, this has 2 names in Trafalgar Law and Don Quixote Rosinante, giving it so much flexibility to be able to be searched on stuff like the 1-cost Rosinante Searcher from back in, I think it was OP12. But being a Don Quixote Pirates type, you can use Sugar as a searcher for this card. This is a 6-cost blocker that with your leader effect, you can actually make a 4-cost blocker. And then on the on play, you can draw 1 card, replace it in the hand, and re-ramp a Dawn as active. Perfect for the 5 Dawn turn for your leader effect, right? Being able to put back a Dawn, play this out on the field, get back to 5 Dawn, and draw a card on top of that while swinging 6 with your leader. This card is so valuable and so good in my opinion, and I'm really curious to try out more, especially when EB04 releases now that we have that promo 4-cost blocker law. I've got Flame Dragon Torch in here, especially if you're playing Kaido. This is just a good card to be able to have, right? Not only being basically like a Blast Breath of Dawn -1 plus 4,000, which can be generically good in any purple deck, right? But if your leader is Kaido, using that main effect to plus 3,000 power and rest any one of your opponent's characters can be a really nice endgame piece in my opinion. And then you've got Stealth Black, which is a good card for Sanji. Gives it a lot of flexibility to be able to play out stuff like those Sanjis that are Alabasta type that I was talking about earlier, to where if your opponent KOs it in a previous turn or somehow gets rid of it, well, just bring it right back onto the field. And especially with your leader effect as UP Sanji of just Dawn -1, you can use this essentially for that Dawn -1 cost to just get back your Sanji on the field. It makes those sticky Sanji bodies even more sticky. Now, finally, we're going to go into the tier 3 category. This is mostly like tech cards or low-end kind of surprise cards that I see a lot of times in different decks. Nothing overly meta or urgent that you need to get. Starting out with Usopp. I've been impressed by this Usopp, right? Especially in stuff like red-green Luffy, and most red-green Luffys that I've seen play this card play 2 of them, being able to, at the end of turn, to get 2 Dawn as active, which in that deck specifically means that you've got 4,000 counter power. Kinemon as well, I've got in the tier 3 category. We saw this very early, I think, in the OP14 format, but didn't really stick through time, especially now. I do think it is cheeky to have, though, especially as a slash character. It is searchable. Setting up 3 Dawn as active with the on play effect is basically like an early leader effect without having to rest anything at all. And then on KO, you can just rest one of your opponent's cards. So if your opponent tries to KO it, right, with battle or maybe an effect of some sort, you can really punish them. Kozuki Oden, I think, is another interesting card that I see every so often in Dracula Mihawk. It's not necessarily a staple 2K, but it is a choice 2K, right? Especially if the going is bad and you need to play this down on the field. At least on the defensive side, it'll be a 7,000 power character on your opponent's turn. A little bit beefier to try to protect. I've also got Yosaku in the tier 3 category. I'm not a huge fan, and I don't really know who plays this card, right? But it's just so interesting to me, right? Especially as a 4 cost or less will not become active in your opponent's next refresh phase. There could be a lot of sneaky value, especially if we get other green kind of leaders that have a similar thing to Dracula Mihawk, where you can proactively rest various cards, right? Stages, characters, Dawn, etc. This can be huge for being able to have a pesky attacking body be frozen in your opponent's next refresh phase, or maybe even something like a blocker Marco, Warcury, etc. For fun, I've also gotten the tier 3 category, right? For fun is another one of those counter events, plus 3,000 on the counter, but on the main, you can KO a rested 7,000 base character or less, which could be very nice, especially as you restand Dawn. After using leader effect with Dracula Mihawk, you can't play character cards. You can still play events. So if you've got 4 Dawn open, might as well use it for fun. Have some good removal. You've got Aladdin here as well. This is something that I see every so often in the Jinbei decks. I don't think you need it or should really play it, but you can if you so choose to. Being able to cheat out a 3 cost or less from your hand, especially in the Jinbei deck, could be nice for stuff like the Arlong, could be good for Hachan, Chu, all these different little bodies on the field, but maybe some of the other ones, like stuff we could have already within the last several sets or stuff that's coming up in the future. And on KO just replaces itself basically in the hand, and as a 5,000 power swinging body, could just be a really pesky poke card for your opponent. Got Shirahoshi as well. I've seen this in some Jinbei lists, right? It's a 4 cost blocker that on play, drawing 1 card, replacing itself in the hand, you can then play a 3 cost Fishman or Merfolk type card from your hand, which could be that list that I said just a moment ago with Aladdin. I like this card, but I'm not convinced that you need it in Jinbei. Now, Shiryu, this is my personal favorite. I'm a big fan of Emporio Ivankov in OP14 EB04, and I understand that it is definitely cope, but it just synergizes so well within the deck of on play, returning a card to your opponent's hand. Can be anything on the field that doesn't have a protection effect on it. But then trashing your entire hand allows you to draw up to 4 with Emporio Ivankov or Inazuma. Hannibal, also very nice within the Ivankov deck, allows you to cheat out an Impel Down character type with 6 or less, which could be Inazuma, and several other different options like the Impel Down Luffy. Big fan of this card, especially as a 6k blocker, right? You're not just going to eat a 5,000 power chum swing, but also, especially if you play that Inazuma down on the field, you can get rid of like 4 cards from your hand just from this card alone. I've got Watatsumi here. This is a 2K that some people play within the deck. We've seen it in the Japan Championships as well, though I don't think it's a staple. When you use your leader effect, this will be an attacking body, and especially because we talked about the Adeline, the Shirahoshi, right? If you're running that kind of package, you definitely want to add Watatsumi into your deck because it fulfills that requirement to be able to play it out onto the field, cheating it out from their various on-play effects. I've got Pika. Not a lot of people play Pika in Doflamingo, and I personally don't either, but I really like this end of turn phase, especially if your leader is that Don Quixote Pirates type. Re-ramping 1 Dawn as active can be so nice to be able to set up different counter events, be able to re-ramp you, right? There's no other condition that you need outside of a leader. You don't have to be more or less than your opponent or anything of the sort. This is a good character in my opinion, and I really enjoy this one, although I'm currently not playing it. I've got Pentachromatic String. I have seen this not only in Doflamingo, but also decks like UP Luffy, right? We see several UP Luffy decks not running Thunder Bagua anymore, right? Because it has that 2 life or less requirement. Maybe you don't want to take that life, but you still want to ramp with Pentachromatic String. Now the requirement with this 2 cost 4,000 power counter event is that your opponent just needs a 6k on the field, and boom, then you're able to ramp 1 Dawn to be able to maybe use your leader effect or get a step closer to your leader effect. which honestly 6k is pretty easy to hit, I feel like, in the stages that you're gonna want to play this card. I'm currently not playing it right now in my UP Luffy list, but I have seen, especially in the Japan Championships or the Asian Championships that we've watched, we've seen people play this card. It's not overly uncommon. Skipping black entirely and going on to yellow, we've got Gloriosa. Now, Gloriosa is a good card in Boa. I'm not convinced that it's a staple in Boa, but it's basically like another Hiyori, right? Being able to add the top or bottom card from your life and then put a card from your hand in its replacement. This can be great for setting up something like Gorgon Sisters that I talked about, or Ran, or whatever, to be able to play out on the field, draw a card off your leader effect, and then have your win rate go up exponentially. Salome is another card that I think we've seen in one or two of the championships that we've covered on the channel by Boa players. Just a really nice, cheap 3-cost blocker, right? Especially as something that your opponent may not expect. If you can manipulate it, right? It's basically an on-play draw one from your leader effect. If it's coming from life because of that trigger of just playing the card, and now you have a blocker that your opponent has to get around, which a lot of decks aren't going to expect that, so probably hit pretty well. Victoria's Sindri is a more common card that I think we see in Gecko than Salome, but I think it's falling off a little bit in the Gecko list, so that's why I've got it in the tier 3 category and not the tier 2. And I really only think you need like 2 copies of this card. I don't really know if you need a full playset. It is a common, so it's going to be really easy to get, so might as well just get 4. You don't have to if you don't need to. The difference between Salome, though, with this card, which I think is a reason why a lot of Geckos are taking out this card, is that its trigger doesn't play it down onto the field. It just plays a 4-cost or less as rested, which more often than not, you're either going to use Absalom, Perona, or Dr. Hogback. We've got Rindo as well, something that we see from time to time in the Boa decks, right? On opponent's turn, on KO, you're basically cycling a life, right? Healing one from your deck and then taking 1 life. It's also a 5,000 power character with a trigger that basically plays the card. So it's another one of these bodies that you can spam out onto the field to get that draw one from your leader effect and get a lot of value and pressure, especially on that on KO effect. If you use something like the 4-cost Boa and you know what those top 3 cards are, you can basically just draw 1. I've also got Brickbat in here. This is something that we see in a lot of these Gecko lists, right? It's a 1-cost 3k counter event for a Thriller Bark kind of leader. The only reason I've got it in tier 3 and not tier 2 is because Gecko is the only Thriller Bark leader that has this, but stuff like Perona is black. So if this was a black card, I'd probably have it in the tier 2 category, but because it's yellow, tier 3. Moving into the home stretch of cards, now in the EB04 tier 3 cards, I've got Scaled Neptunian here. This is an interesting card because I think it's the first card that we got revealed that has a new keyword on it, Rush Character. We talked about it earlier with Dazbones basically being able to rush a character. This is a simpler way to put it, and a different way to put it, I would say. They're not the same thing. But being able to draw a ton of cards based on the Neptunians that you have on the field, and then trash basically being a hand filter, is so good in stuff like Shirahoshi. I don't think Shirahoshi becomes an overly meta deck with the addition of this card, but you can argue that this is a great one to have, right? Not only do you have an 8,000 power body that can swing at a character, but you also get hand filter potential because you probably have a ton of Neptunians on the field. I've also got Kozuki Sukiyaki as well in tier 3 category for our red-green Odin fans, right? Being able on that activate main once per turn to give a rested Dawn to your leader is actually really valuable. You can now play on curve earlier in the game and get your leader effect off, right, with that Dawn ×1. Big fan of this card, although similar to the Kiku Nojo, I don't think it pushes it over the edge into like an overly meta relevant deck. Bird Neptunian, also going to be a nice card for Shirahoshi, right? Being able on that activate main to restand some Dawn for extra power, different effects, and then when attacking, resting an 8-cost or less, that's a lot of value, right? Especially on this 5-cost, 7,000 power character. Mystons is also a nice little tech card for the Care deck, and I say tech specifically. On your turn, if you have 3 or more Minx type characters, all your opponent's characters have -1 cost, which doesn't have as much value as we want right now in the format, but could be something that gets more as time goes on. It also has the on play of if your leader has the Minx type, you can play another Minx type character with a cost of 5 or less from your hand, which is definitely pretty good, right? You can not only play out this 6-cost My Stomps, but also the 5-cost Carrot from OP08, which is a broken card. Especially because this My Stomps effect goes off first if you fulfill the 3 or more requirement of -1, and so now your Carrot, right, that you play out on in the field because of this effect is going to freeze an 8-cost base or lower, which is definitely pretty good. Just again, doesn't hit the exact numbers that we needed to right now in this format. So I'd have this in your back pocket for the Carrot fans. We've got Chaka and Pell, and I was really thinking about putting this in the tier 2 category, but I'm really just kind of waiting to see how Vivi reacts, right? That red-blue Vivi in the East that is in EB03, how it reacts with this card, right? Because it's obvious that this synergizes well with this Vivi right here, right? Being able to cheat it out onto the field. And then sure, yeah, give your leader minus 5,000 power. You just get to draw 2 cards, replacing itself, especially if you play it off of the 7-cost Vivi, and then having double attack. Wow, that's pretty good. This card is definitely really, really good, but only if Vivi commits to the Alabasta typing, which is really going to make the deck change a little bit in terms of the boss monsters and things like that. We see a lot of like removal cards like Silver's Rayleigh, 10-cost Shanks, maybe some draw and 10-cost Kaido right now in the deck. So I think the deck would have to change a little bit in order to fit this card in, which is why I'm a little cautious on it. And then the final card that we've got in here is Groggy Monsters, right? This is an option that you can utilize in the Foxy deck, but I don't think it's needed in the Foxy deck. But you've got 3 or more Foxy Pirate type cards, KO a 6,000 base character or less. That's just good in general, especially with just a Dawn -1 and you fulfill that character requirement. Especially now, because in the earlier stages of the game, right, you've got 1-cost searchers like the Porsche to be able to find out these different bodies on there. You've got a much better shot either on curve or in different stages of the game to be able to have those 3-cost Foxy Pirate type characters. And that's going to be it. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you want to see the full-scale breakdown, right, and visualize all the different things and not have to always reference this video, I do have a Google Sheet that you can view for free down in the description below. I'm glad that my voice didn't give out. I've lost my voice as of recently, so I hope you get some good pulls in your release event and hope you get some good cards. Don't buy them right away because especially the SRs, they'll be overinflated. Wait about like a week or 2 to be able to buy them, but just get them whenever you want. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you later.